Yoga of Self-Perfection. This is a part of a series of talks given at the Madhapur Sri Aurobindo Study Circle in Hyderabad in 2017.
तत्सवितुर्वरं रूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपयेत्। We are now in the Yoga of Self-Perfection, Chapter 9, the Liberation of Nature. There is a fourfold process that Sri Aurobindo outlines to arrive at the highest state of consciousness. The first, he talks about purification, then he talks about liberation, then he talks about perfection, and then he talks about delight. The background is that in the path of integral yoga, the journey of a soul is not to seek emancipation or mukti from this world, but to realize God in himself, to realize the universal energy in himself, and then in that full state of highest consciousness participate in the unfolding of the world. And through that participation one derives the delight, which is the secret of the existence. So it is not just liberation and we stop. We actually go further to perfection, and then once we are an integrated perfect being, we participate in the universe in its unfolding and derive the secret delight, the rasa of existence. Shuddhi, Mukti, Siddhi, and then Bhukti. That is how he talks about. So when talking about purification, we talked in the earlier chapters, we had 2 chapters dedicated to purification. Purification of the lower elements, which is the pranic aspect, Pranamaya Purusha, the psychical prana, how the psychical prana currently has in its strong grip all our faculties, and how we have to first purify the desire element and craving element that vitiates this prana, and then gradually we move to the higher elements of manas and buddhi. How we talk about the sense mind, manas, is presently dominating in us, purification of manas. And then we talked about purification of buddhi, the faculty that has the potential to reflect the highest truth, but currently is not because of our limitations. So we did the purification of the lower, purification of the higher. And then there are 2 chapters on liberation, liberation of the spirit and liberation of nature. In the previous chapter, talking about liberation of spirit, Sri Aurobindo says, of course, liberation comes after purification, and there are 4 things that Sri Aurobindo points out. The traditional knots of human nature, which is the heart, the mind, and the psychical prana, which we talked about purifying, now you have to be liberated from them. Then liberation from desire and ego. This is the second thing he pointed out. Ego distorts our understanding of the world, our purpose in this world, and the very life that we lead is so distorted by ego that we think that is the natural state of existence. We almost have come to believe that an egocentric life focused on security and satisfaction of me, my family, is the natural disposition of human beings. This is how a man is supposed to live. We have come so far in the distortion. But for a spiritual seeker who wishes to evolve beyond the narrow limitations of human existence and find his superior existence, ego is the single biggest bottleneck. So desire and ego was the second part, the knots, the desire and ego. We talked about these two elements in a lot of detail in the liberation of the spirit. The third and fourth, Sri Aurobindo pointed out in the previous chapter, are the dualities. Dualities is Kama, Krodha, Raga, Dvesha, all of these various elements that are there inside of us. And we have like or dislike, hatred, joy or grief. All of these are dualities of existence in which we are trapped. We have to go above the dualities. And then the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamo gunas. So these liberation from these two elements was the last of the four. Knots of heart, mind and psychic prana. Second, desire and ego. Third, dualities. And fourth, gunas. So in this chapter, Sri Aurobindo takes up the dualities and gunas. This is the nature at its working. So as we begin this chapter, the first thing Sri Aurobindo talks about is the two sides of our being, the conscious experiencing soul and the executive nature. So one, there is a soul inside of it which carries these experiences from life to life. But then the soul cannot work in this world directly. It needs nature as an instrument. So the soul and nature, what does nature do? Nature is continuously and variously offering the soul its experiences. So there is the soul and there is the nature, and the soul grows by the experiences of nature. These two things together determine in their meeting all affections of our inner status and its responses. In other words, the very experience of life is a function of these two elements, and in most cases for us, it is the nature that derives and drives. If we are the superior experiencing soul, why is it that we have become so entrapped? How is it that we have fallen from our divine status? Sri Aurobindo says, the acceptance of the instrumental ego consciousness and the will to desire are the initial consent of the self to lapse into the lower ranges of experience in which it forgets its divine nature of being. We talked about how ego consciousness and egocentric life, where I am born, I need to take care of myself and my family. I need the security, satisfaction and joy of me and my family. That is the purpose for which my entire life is dedicated. This has become the common principle of existence today. But that principle is essentially centered around ego. For a spiritual person, one has to grow beyond this narrow circle to be able to connect to the universe. But what has happened is we have accepted that instrumental ego consciousness. It has become natural to us. The other element is the will to desire. Naturally, once there is the ego and we have a will to desire security, safety, accumulation of comforts, insecurity when something is not fulfilled, these have become natural parts. So ego and desire. Again, if you go back to chapter 5 of the small book, The Mother, the Divine Worker, the first statement, if you want to be a true doer of divine works, your first aim must be to be totally free from all desire and self-regarding ego. Ego-desire complex has become the center of our world, and usko humko hatana hoga. That statue which we are worshipping of ego and desire, we have to shake it and move it away from the center of our existence. Absolutely, ego is the helper. In fact, in that same series, there is multiple things that he says.
Ego as well as desire. How can desire help?
That was a same sentence it is told now. First we have will to desire, affected by that, accepted that. Desire to become something. But slowly that desire has become something else.
But see, without desire, what is the basis to desire? The basis desire is to protect your own existence. If you take away desire to protect your soul existence, our species would have been wiped out. Somewhere you had protected your existence, somewhere you had desired to eat, somewhere you had desired pleasure, therefore you procreated. So desire was a helper at some stage, but we have become so much engrossed in it that we have inverted the purpose and said that no, there is no other thing other than ego and desire I will worship my entire life. Somewhere we have to step back from it if we want to become a spiritual person, because what this ego and desire complex does is it makes us forget our divine nature of being. So what is the way forward? The rejection of these things and the return to the free self and the will of the divine delight in being is the liberation of the spirit. And in chapter 8 we dealt with a lot of the desire and ego principle. Last time we dealt a lot with desire and ego principle because he covered these two topics in that. And now he talks about the dualities and gunas, this chapter.
Very experience of life comes from nature. Nature consists of two elements.
I will get into more detail on what nature is. In fact, we discuss the Sankhya aspect of nature now. Yeah. It goes back to our favorite topic. Remember the 4 P's? What was the second and third? 4 P's we talked about. No, 4 P's. First was peace. Foundation of sadhana is peace, according to Sri Aurobindo. Without peace, no experience is permanent. First, we all have to establish peace inside of ourselves. The second 2 P's were Purusha and Prakriti. And that is where the duality and Sankhya, all of that will come in. And the 4th P, which you said was the silent P, is the psychic being. 4 P's. So what does nature comprise of? So going forward, he says nature comprises of 2 things, the gunas and the dualities. This chapter deals specifically with the gunas and somewhat with the dualities. A complete liberation from the ego and will of desire must bring with it a superiority to the qualitative modes of nature. Traigunyatita, the one that has risen above the 3 gunas. A release from the mixed and discordant experience, a cessation or solution to the dual action of nature. So we go forward in gunas and dualities. So what are the 3 gunas? Right? Now we take a lot of discussion. Almost 70% of this chapter is the 3 gunas. But before going there, Sri Aurobindo points out something here, and again he comes back to it at the end of the chapter. He says, okay, you want to go beyond the gunas and dualities. Dvandvatita, Trigunatita. This is the 2 points that Gita also talks about. There are 2 ways of doing it. 1, suppress them in your life. Don't let them express. Go to the opposite. Your body desires pleasure, so give it pain. Your body desires food, starve it. Your body wants to protect itself from cold, stand in cold water. And try to push your nature to such an extent that it refuses anymore to impact you and your spirit has come out from the tentacles of nature. You subdue nature and liberate the soul. This is one method. The other method is where Sri Aurobindo says, evolve yourself to such an extent where your nature calms down but participates in the world. In the other one, you have abolished nature. Here, you are transforming nature and continuing with the work in the world and participating in the world. This is the second kind of liberation. These are the 2 kinds, and we will come back to it again towards the end. So, the thing is, many of us are unaware of the philosophical roots of several spiritual truths in the Indian context. In other words, we are not theorists, we are practitioners. We come to spirituality from the path of practice, not from the path of study theory. You are not a doctorate in philosophy, you are a practitioner of philosophy. In the process, what has happened is we are unaware of the theories of philosophy completely. Right? There are several systems of philosophy in the Indian context. Okay. And to comprehensively understand each of them, at least preliminary understanding of each of them will help us develop further on the path of practice. It is like a homeopathy or a allopathy. I know that I can give you a painkiller, I know that I can give you a little bit, but just because by trial and error I know doesn't mean I really know. Somewhere I need to develop the understanding. So even in Bhagavad Gita there is a reference to Sankhya philosophy. And if you go back to Sankhya philosophy, what it talks about. So for example, to complete the other discussion, Nyaya, Vaiseshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Uttarabhimamsa, Purvamimamsa. These are called 6 systems of Indian philosophy. These are the 6 theistic systems of Indian philosophy. These 6 systems accept Veda as the basis. And Charvaka, Buddhism and Jainism do not accept Veda as the basis. And there are 3 other systems of philosophy. So totally Indian system of philosophy has 9 systems in it. We don't have to go into all the details, but these are the ones associated, and we are taking up only one from it, which is Sankhya today. In the Sankhya system, Tamas is the principle of inertia, Rajas is the principle of kinesis, passion, endeavor, struggle, initiation. Sattva is the principle of assimilation, equilibrium and harmony. This is what the Sankhya system says. These 3 principles enter into all things and combine to give them their turn of active nature and the result and the effectuation. All character of action and experience is in us determined by the predominance and the interaction of these 3 qualities. In other words, what he is saying is, whatever comes naturally to us, whatever we feel, मैं ऐसा हूँ, it comes based on the mixture of these 3 principles. Some people can work 18 hours a day, no problem, and even at the end of it, they are still like a bull in a china shop. अगर रात को सुबह 5 बजे से रात को 8 बजे तक 8 o'clock in the evening you get into an argument, they are still full of energy to fight. Somebody else has a capacity to work for 6 hours a day. If you make them work 10 hours a day, they are like a small plant which has not been given water. It just droops. And if somebody argues with them at that time, they'll say, really, today I can't talk also. Whatever you want, you do. I agree. I don't want to argue. I say that. Some others are by temperament sattvic in nature. They don't utter harsh words. They may disagree with you, but they will not react to you. They will give you a small hint of their standpoint. बहुत आराम से, धीरे. This is the sattvic temperament. Somewhere along the way, all of us and everything in this universe is a mixture of all the 3. Many of us in today's date and time and 21st century and the kind of running around, we are all Rajasic. Dominant quality is Rajasic. Particularly in family, everywhere, even at work culture. Look at how our work culture is. We are always out to get, out to prove, out to dominate, out to acquire. Isn't that our work culture today? We may be polished in our words. Don't go by the words. Look at the intent. The intent is pure Rajasic intent. Most of office politics is all Rajasic intent. Some may be sophisticated, some may be crude. Some may wear a tie, some may not. That doesn't make the intent any different. The soul in its personality is obliged to run into the molds of nature, and it is controlled by them rather than has any free control of them. So we started by talking about soul and nature. Nature has these 3 gunas, and soul is trapped in the mold of nature. And therefore, sometimes an entire life is spent in those fixed molds because you don't change them. What is Rajas at a 10-year-old kid when he throws a tantrum is the same Rajas at the 20-year-old kid who has beaten up his friend. It is the same Rajas that gets into some other altercation when you're 30 or 40. The principle is the same. The expression may have evolved. We have to watch that. If we don't consciously break the mold, our entire life we have not made any progress, and that's very scary. There are 4 paths that people say: darkness to darkness, darkness to light, light to darkness, and light to light. If the journey becomes light to darkness, we are really, really unfortunate. Sometimes these are karmic tendencies. In all of us, both the seeds are present. It is only which seed we water that sprouts. They are all there in us. And when we have come to the mother, the guaranteed and surest way is to hold on to her feet every day and surrender to her, saying that मैंने आज ये भी गलती किया, मैंने आज वो भी गलती किया, I have done this wrong, but doesn't matter, I'm holding on to your feet. हमको darkness to darkness is a state where we don't even know our weaknesses. हमारी जो कमियां हैं हमको पता तक नहीं है. Darkness to light ये है कि हमारी कमियां हमको पता है लेकिन हम उनसे बाहर आने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. लाइट टू डार्कनेस ये होता है कि हमको पता है ये गलत है लेकिन हम करते हैं. दैट इज लाइट टू डार्कनेस. क्यों करते हैं? व्हाई डू वी डू दैट? कंपल्शन, सर्कमस्टेंसेस, एवरीबडी एल्स आल्सो डज इट सिंड्रोम, अलग अलग चीजें हैं. बट आवर होप शुड बी एज अ स्पिरिचुअल पर्सन टू ट्राई एंड हैंग ऑन एंड सरेंडर टू द डिवाइन मदर एंड प्लीड हर, टेक मी फ्रॉम लाइट टू ग्रेटर लाइट. See, this is a very good point you have asked. Subduing nature, does it work permanently or does it work temporarily? In fact, if you see, the greatest falls, and people have fallen from light to darkness, supposedly, in spiritual people, in very spiritual people, it is often a case where they have controlled and suppressed nature for a prolonged period of time. But at some point in time, either momentarily or for prolonged period due to change of circumstances, the nature subdues the spiritual person. We talked about that 600-pound gorilla and our battling with it. Nature is a 600-pound gorilla. The reason we say it is a 600-pound gorilla is because it has in it the momentum of maybe dozens of lives of our past and our vasanas and our karmas and all of that. You cannot suppress nature for a prolonged period. But again, it will come back. But again, the battle goes on. So in some paths, the more you can suppress, the more you will dilute it, and in the long term, you may yield the benefit. But temporarily, when the nature sits on top of you, you say, "अरे इतना बड़ा आदमी देखो कैसा काम किया है. Such a great man, इतना गिर गया है." It is a very superficial judgment because only he knows the battle he is fighting. After all, for whom is he trying to be a spiritual man? He is trying to seek the divine as much as any of us. It is just that at some point in time, the nature is so powerful that it overpowers you. And that is where surrender to the Divine Mother is even more. One of my friends said that the force of the divine nature, the divine and the nature, the battle between them, sometimes you can be like a man standing on a street with torn clothes. It can be so dramatic on the inside. And even from a social point of view, it is a fierce battle. And one has to pray for the divine protection all the time and ask her to pull us out of tamal. Nature is not the will of Lord. In us, the way it manifests is a perverted will of Lord, perverted by ego and desire. Last time, when we discussed desire, we talked about desire as two forms, where we see it from below to above. Right? We want something, so there is a desire. Where does it come from in its original source? In its original source, it comes from the desire of the Lord to manifest, the desire of the unity to become multiplicity. So there is a higher aspect also, but in us it is perverted. So now, the following section talks very beautifully about tamas, rajas and sattva. Tamas, the principle of inertia. Rajas, the principle of kinetic movement, and sattva, calmness and all of that. Sri Aurobindo says, first of all, tamas has its strongest hold. He applies the sattva, rajo, tamoguna framework to the physical, vital and mental. And he says, he does a mapping. And he says, tamas as the principle of inertia is the strongest in the physical. The action of this principle is of two kinds, inertia of force and inertia of knowledge. Whatever is predominantly governed by tamas tends in its force to a sluggish action, immobility or mechanical action. So first it is, in the basest form it is immobility. In the next it is sluggish movement. And third, it is repetitive and mechanical in nature, tamasic. It finds comfort in familiarity. Why does it repeat itself? Because it feels, take for example, gossip. In family gossip, over a decade of period of time, you can see the gossip centering around the same events, around the same people, discussed by the same people again and again and again and again. 5 साल बाद भी वही टॉपिक्स आएंगे, वही कैरेक्टर्स होते हैं, वही एक्शंस होते हैं, वही. Why do we repeat it? We derive a certain tamasic pleasure from it. Simple examples, we don't have to make this so high that we can't understand. These are things we have to relate to. हमारा डे टू डे इश्यूज में हमको पता चलना चाहिए. जब हम ज्यादा गॉसिप फैमिली का करते हैं, that is a tamasic reaction. Tamas, in fact, Sri Aurobindo has a very interesting take on each of these qualities, which is, normally we stop at this, it is darkness, it is inertia, but he explains it more beautifully as to how it applies to the emotional side and the mental side also. What is the other things? Tamas brings in all the ignorance, inertia, weakness, incapacity. Now, clouded reason, when your reason is clouded and you are not working clearly, clouded by your desire, clouded by other things, it is again a sign of tamas. Clinging to the habitual actions, clinging to the mechanical ideas. Spiritual tamas is very interesting because some people create a routine saying that this routine will help me make spiritual progress. There is nothing wrong with it. In fact, I am a big fan of routine because I feel that when you have routine, you have discipline. When you have discipline, your nature gradually begins to change. For example, every morning I get up and meditate at 5 o'clock. It will allow me to gradually ensure that I am meditating regularly. And the first thing I do is invoke the highest light into me, and therefore I become more and more sattvic person. There is a certain ritual I perform because I like that ritual. There is a certain physical discipline I perform because. But while these are helpful for most part, we should also not make a fetish out of it. A fetish out of it. We should not become entrapped in those molds again, because that is again tamasic. This mold needs to be broken because what worked for you for 10 years may not work for you for the next 10 years. After 10 years of regularly meditating at 5 o'clock, every moment of the day should have become meditation by now. You don't need a special time for it. So time has come to break that mold. I'm just giving you one relatable example where you may have already succeeded in separating the Purusha from the Prakriti. So spontaneously your connection with the Divine Mother has become strong. So you are in 24-hour meditation and Manan. Some may choose to still keep the routine. That's a separate matter, but one should not become victimized about that. One should not become restless because today I don't have a routine. That is again a side of tamas. Nature is very difficult to control without the discipline of a routine. It is extremely difficult. You need routine. It is like you're taming a wild elephant. It is like you're taming a gorilla. You have to give it the taste. The gorilla should feel the taste. And then it should walk behind you. You can't drag your gorilla. And that giving taste comes through routine. After 10 days of meditation, automatically you open your eyes at 4:45 on the 11th day. Why? The gorilla is wanting it now. Earlier, before that, if you open your eyes at 4:45, you will say, what the hell, why am I getting up so early? Let me go back to sleep. Because I'm used to sleeping till 6:37. So nature has its quirks and routine is important in it. But we also need to break it at some point and evolve it and elevate it in some way. Another very interesting point, Sri Aurobindo talks about tamas, and do pay careful attention to it and contemplate on it later. He says, impotent will is also tamasic in nature. What is impotent will? I want to get up and meditate at 5 o'clock in the morning. But when at 4:45 I get up, nahi, aaj nahi, kal karenge. आज नहीं कल करेंगे, आज मेडिटेशन नहीं होगा, कल रात थक गए थे. And if that goes on and on, you are not changing your routine. You are letting your life carry you. That impotent will, अगले बार मैं ये नहीं करूंगा, फिर कर देते हैं. Impotent will, part of later on, yes. So this yielding, Sri Aurobindo says, weak yielding to the lower nature is tamasic. Very powerful, huh? Weak yielding to the lower nature is a tamasic trait. It's not a rajasic battle, it is a tamasic trait. Tamas brings into our emotional nature insensibility, indifference, want of sympathy, openness. There are people you will come across who will not help another person even if they have nothing to lose. These are very common in life. You go and ask something from somebody, they have nothing to lose. They just have to put in an iota of effort and it will make a big difference to your life. Why should I do it? And we encounter such people. We encounter such people routinely. They will not move a finger unless there is a personal benefit for them. That is a tamasic trait. The other person's situation does not move you. It does not concern you. What is it? Thousands of people are suffering. I don't even know this chap. Let him go do what he wants. Why should I change anything? No, that rule is there. This rule is there. In government offices, you see a lot of such people. They know they can do it. And we all know that in our India, this is a country that is not governed by principles. It is governed by people. Nobody works according to the principle of the work. If you know somebody, you can get your work done. If you don't know somebody, you are one of the 1.3 billion people and most of them are suffering because the principle that a government servant is there to serve doesn't exist in this country. It is so pervasive, we all know it. But he will not help you because there's no personal benefit. Go stand in the line. Okay, after 2 hours in the line, oh, you put this form, you should have put that form. You should have signed here, you have signed there. You didn't bring this document, you didn't bring that document. You go the second day, he will give you 2 more documents. This is the nature of tamas, inertia of India today. Into our aesthetic and sensational nature, there is a limited range of response, insensibility to beauty. So when you go to somebody's house and you kind of wonder if there was a nuclear explosion there, it is tamasic in nature. When you go to your office desk and it is essentially no longer looking flat, it is looking like a mountain with all sorts of papers, all sorts of paraphernalia, then you know it is tamasic. Beauty has an inherent element of spirituality in it, and where that doesn't exist, it is a sign of tamas. Rajas, the principle of rajas has its strongest hold on vital nature. Physical, vital. Tamas is physical, rajas is vital. Inertia of knowledge is essentially coming back to not using the discrimination faculty. Yielding to lower nature is essentially what? You have the knowledge that you should act a certain way, but you don't act a certain way. You say, okay, that is good. This knowledge is all wonderful to listen to in sermons, but it is not to be practiced. That is nothing but inertia of knowledge. We don't use our knowledge powerfully enough. Rajas. What is the essential need for Rajas? In this section, Sri Aurobindo introduces us to a very beautiful and almost eye-opening concept of Rajas. Fundamentally, is there anybody here who thinks Rajas is good? Rajas अच्छा है कोई सोचता है? You do? Most of us think Rajas is where our emotions come from, where our passions come from, where our greed, jealousy, lust, all of this is Rajas. Restlessness. We don't want Rajas. We think it is bad, essentially, in most cases. लेकिन ये Rajas क्यों आया? There is a very beautiful description that Sri Aurobindo gives here. Visualize the world without Rajas. Visualize a world without Rajas. In the evolution of earth, matter came first, life came later, right? And then came mind. Now, this phone is here, right? You are sitting there. Matter. Movement is life. This is matter. Without touching it, using your willpower, can you move this? Let us say, I tell you that there is a secret. If you concentrate on it hard enough and long enough, you can move it. There are people who do psychokinetics. How much effort do you need to do to move this phone? Just visualize it. Visualize to move this object without touching it, purely using your willpower. How much willpower do you need to put in? I mean, it is a willpower of tremendous intensity. Concentrate karo. Minutes, hours, maybe days. Focus. You are trying to shake the dead inertia. The power of Rajas had to do it for the first movement to happen. Go back to an earth which was just there was no movement. To move it needed a tremendous amount of tapas and focus. It is not easy. I mean, just visualize the intensity I am trying to communicate to you. Going back to a dead, dark, cold world. For something to stir inside of it needed essentially an infinite force. A force of infinite proportions. That infinite force is Rajas. It changes our perspective. Because life can only manifest where there is Rajas. Where there is no Rajas, there is no life. It is death, it is silent, it is dark. Rajas came into this world with that kind of intensity. Sri Aurobindo says, Rajas finding itself in a world of matter, which starts from the principle of inconscience and inertia, has to work against an immense contrary force. Therefore, its whole action takes on the nature of an effort, of a struggle, a besieged and impeded conflict for possession, which is distressed in its every step by limiting incapacity, disappointment, and suffering. Even its gains are precarious and limited and marred by the reaction of the efforts and an aftertaste of insufficiency and transience. So you make all this infinite effort and then there is one vibration, not even a movement, a vibration. Again, a tremendous amount of intensity. One more vibration. And somewhere after millions of such efforts, there is the first stirring, the first shudder. I mean, we are talking of a force that had to work extremely hard to manifest in this universe. And we embody that principle of Rajas.
We have that infinite force as well as infinite knowledge inside.
Knowledge is there. Knowledge is what started that force to come in and manifest. But just feel that for a second inside of you. How much intensity had it to work to make the world manifest? It opened my eyes when I read this, because I always considered Rajas as something one had to only get rid of to move to the Sattvic stage. But when you understand, perhaps there's more sympathy towards Rajas in some way, because after all there is a purpose why it is. And this is the beauty of Sri Aurobindonian approach towards yoga and insights towards understanding of humanity and human and terrestrial evolution. It doesn't negate anything for the purpose of it. It goes to its root cause. It tries to understand कि रजोगुण आया क्यों? And when you understand it, it gives you a new light. You say that without it I wouldn't exist. Without Rajogun, life would not exist, which means I would not exist. So what does Rajas do? It turns to egoism, self-will and violence. The perverse, obstinate or exaggerating action of reason, prejudice, attachment to opinion, clinging to error, the subservience of the intelligence to the desires and preferences and not to the truth. So, on one side we saw the reason why it came, on the other side we are now seeing the distortions that it brings. There are two things that Sri Aurobindo said in the earlier chapters. Why is there distortion? The distortion is there for two reasons. One, there is an evolutionary momentum that is carrying that distortion. हमारे पूर्वजन्म के संस्कार और वासना हमको उस तरफ ले जा रहे हैं. और दूसरा ये है कि each principle is dependent on the inferior principle for its manifestation. The mind is dependent on life and life is dependent on matter. And the principle of matter is inertia. Life is dependent on that inertia. Rajas is dependent on that inertia and perversion. That is why it gets distorted. We will come to that. All of these will be elevated. There are divine principles behind these terrestrial understanding. Well, we will see. He will explain further perhaps. Rajas produces the vivid, restless, kinetic man, driven by the breath of action, passion and desire. Go-getter, honge kamyab. That is Rajas always. The Rajasic man is the statesman, the warrior, the forceful man of action. The truth of the matter is, irrespective of whether we are these wonderful warriors or not, each of us is dominantly Rajasic nowadays. Some of us are able to contain it, some of us are not able to contain it. Rajas manifests at the physical, vital and mental level. At the physical level, when it manifests, it does not let you sit still. Sometimes, the biggest punishment you can give to a person is just tell him to sit in the chair and don't do anything. कुछ मत करो आप, बैठो and stay stable, हिलना नहीं. Just sit comfortably, don't move. Don't move your hand, don't move your leg, don't move your... Because the minute you are moving, you are Rajasic, you are throwing out energy. जब आप हिल रहे हो, and आप कुछ लोगों को देखोगे, आप जाओगे, बात करोगे, they are continuously किट कर रहे हैं पेन के साथ. और मोबाइल के साथ blind leg movement like this. My uncle does like this. His this toe keeps on going up and down all the time. Rajasic, उनका एनर्जी इतना है, उनको पता नहीं है कैसे उसको यूज करना. So this is a way of letting energy go. आप सत्संग में बैठे हो, खिड़की के बाहर देख रहे हो. Rajas, because Rajas does not allow you to stay on one thing. You have come for a satsang, you have left your job, you have taken leave, you have done all the right things because your mind is guiding you. You are sitting at the satsang, the speaker is speaking, your attention is on the tree, it is on the bird, it is on the scooter, it is on the vehicles. Because Rajas is shaking your mind. You are not able to sit in a place and concentrate on anything. This is all Rajasic. Each of them has the positive principle of it. Of course, we can evolve, and for children, all the more it is important to teach them at home, if you ask me. आप punishment की तरह नहीं, आप एक अच्छी चीज की तरह सिखाओ बच्चों को. We all need to learn how to sit without doing anything for 10 minutes. It is necessary for us to be good. Do you want to grow up to be a big person? Do you want to grow up to be a good person? Do you want to grow up to be a successful person? Sit. Because this is important. If you can't do this, you can't be successful. Put it in the way the child will understand. And try to help him. And I have, in my own family, children whom I am trying to do this because 90% rajas. And children do express it more also. They don't have the social conditioning we do. Each principle has its place. What you said just now is a good example of using rajas positively at the mental level. Ambition, yes, you need to come with good marks in your class. You need to be able to be in the best. You are structuring the energy in a particular productive channel. If you do not, and you say you can do whatever you want, it is okay, even if you fail, you are applying the tamasic principle there. No, because we all want our children to be successful. But does it come with restlessness? Does it come with a certain element of depression if the child doesn't achieve it? Does it come with despondency? Does it come with scolding of the child when the child doesn't achieve it? Because there we are applying the negative rajasic principle. So we have to judiciously use the three in a balanced way. Then comes the sattvic part. The principle of sattva has its strongest hold in the mind. So we can understand it's a one-to-one correspondence. Tamasic is matter, rajasic is energy, pranamaya purusha. Sattvic is associated with the mind. Not so much in the lower parts of the mind, which are dominated by life power, but mostly in the intelligence and the will of reason. If you take an example, we have an idea of what is right and what is wrong most of the time. हम करें ना करें, whether we follow that or don't follow it is a separate discussion. Most of the time we have an idea what is right, what is wrong. This comes from the light of intelligence, which is sattvic. We are not confused. A lion, when it wants to mate with a lioness and the lioness has cubs, it goes and kills the cubs so that the lioness can mate with him. It's as simple as that. There is no discriminating faculty there. As humans, we have a discriminating faculty. We have the light of sattva in our mind. We know, there is a clarity. The gifts of sattva are the mind of reason and balance, clarity of disinterested truth-seeking, open intelligence, a will subordinated to reason or guided by the ethical spirit, self-control, equality, calm, love, sympathy, refinement, measure, fineness of aesthetic and emotional mind, delicateness in the sensational being, just acceptivity, fair acceptance, receptivity, moderation, poise, a vitality subdued and governed by a mastering intelligence. All of these traits are sattvic traits. So beautifully put. They're almost elevating when you just read them because you want all of them inside of you. When we are excessively rajasic or tamasic, others' pain does not touch us. Whereas for a man of sattvic nature, sympathy is a spontaneous spring that comes up. There is a beautiful fable, एक छोटी सी कहानी है, where a sage goes to a river to do his morning arghya, where you offer water to the sun. and he lifts up the water and puts it down, and there's a scorpion in the water that is drowning. So it holds on to his hand, but the minute his hand moves, it stings him. And he says, oh, and it falls into the water. Again he picks it up because it's going to drown and die. Again it stings him. Again he drops it. And again he picks it up. Somebody says, sir, don't you know that it will sting you when you pull it up? Why are you pulling it up? He says, it is following its nature, I am following mine. ये ऋषि का तत्व ये है कि जो डूब रहा है उसको बचाना ऋषि का तत्व है, और जब कुछ चीज हिल रहा है और डर लगता है तो उसको काटना स्कॉर्पियन का तत्व है. So somewhere along the way, the Sattvic man has these traits inbuilt in him. And if you ask me why I am a big votary of meditation, is because in a very simple and a personal way I can tell you, what we consider natural to us, in some ways a large part of it should become unnatural to us. The Rajasic negative tendencies and the Tamasic negative tendencies. And what we aspire for as the highest truths, like what we just read, they should become natural to us. This can happen in two ways. One, we use our mental faculty of discrimination and try to make an effort towards aspiration. This is one way, through effort. And the other way is we silence ourselves to receive the higher light, to do the necessary modifications in our nature, with the light directly acting on our cells, which can happen through meditation. This is why I am a big votary of meditation. Though several people in personal interactions criticize me, saying that, why are you always saying meditation, meditation? But I feel that the best opportunity I can give to the mother to work on me is to shut down my mind and shut down my vital and quieten my physical. Let there be silence in the mind, stillness in the vital. Let me invoke her light to the best extent I can and let her do her work. So that somewhere along the way, our reformatting of the hard disk can happen directly by her. Not by my will, not by my aspiration, not by my capacity. Light and happiness are the characteristics of the Sattvic Guna. The Sattvic man, examples are the philosopher, saint and sage. Sattva is always a quality, but then there are limitations of Sattva, which I think you asked me or somebody asked me during the previous discussion. Why do we want to outgrow Sattva? We all want to get to Sattvic nature. Why do you want to outgrow Sattvic nature? You had asked this. Here is the answer. Sattva is always a quality of the limited nature. Sattva cannot act by itself in nature. It has to rely for all action on the aid of Rajas. The same principle, the higher principle needs the lower principle. So that even Sattvic action is always liable to the imperfection of the Rajas. Sattva, when it wishes to intensify itself, seeks to get rid of Rajas and calls in the aid of Tamasic principle of inaction. For intense Sattva, the support of Tamas is needed, because you are now going to withdraw from all action and become still. And that stillness is Tamasic in its source. That is the reason why a certain type of highly Sattvic men live intensely in the inward being, but hardly at all in the outward life of action. Withdrawal becomes the nature of a Sattvic person. And then Sri Aurobindo talks about the overlap of ego, which we covered in the previous chapter, with the three gunas. पिछले चैप्टर में हमने देखा था ईगो अच्छी बात नहीं है. इस चैप्टर में he is relating it to sattva, rajas and tamas. He says there is a physical ego and physical, vital, mental also. He says physical ego, which goes into separativeness. The manifestation of physical ego says that this is me and I am separate from others. The vital ego goes into domination. I get what I want. I try to derive the result I want. And then there is the mental ego which says that I am right all the time. So ego manifests in these principles of physical, vital and mental. There are principles of higher and lower in each of these gunas. It is explained in a couple of different ways. One way is that we pick elements which are conducive for spiritual growth and apply them to ourselves. And then there is also another way where in the divine manifestation also there are higher levels of divine manifestation and lower levels of divine manifestation, where there is a higher tamas and a lower tamas. There is a higher rajas and a lower rajas. This kind of explanation, it comes in some sections of Savitri also, where this discussion goes on. What we discuss in most of what he has written has an expression in Savitri, because it is a sadhana and it is his yoga. Now we come to the liberation of the gunas. How do we transcend them? How do we go above them? We talked about the two methods of liberation, so he discusses the first one. A passive, disengaged liberation which stills the three gunas. Underneath a heavy passive meditation, a passive, disengaged liberation which stills the three gunas underneath heavy meditation permits liberation from nature. You go so deep into yourself that the gunas are stilled. You've almost taken them to cryogenic condition. Sub-zero, 0 degrees Kelvin, minus 272. Put it there. Everything is frozen now. There is no movement. There is no rajas. There is stillness. Traditionally it was believed, now this is my paraphrasing, traditionally it was believed that liberation from nature was not possible while actively engaging with the world. In other words, if you turn it the other way around, the divine, if he wants to manifest in the world, has to subject himself to the limitations of the three gunas. Because once you are liberated, you are the divine. But to come back to the world, you are subject to the three gunas. But Sri Aurobindo says, in reality, what the three gunas stand for, and this is the answer to your question, are three essential powers of the divine, which are not merely existent in perfect equilibrium of quietude, but united in a perfect consensus of divine action. Tamas in the spiritual being becomes divine calm, higher tamas. Lower tamas, at 4 o'clock today, I will be watching the cricket final. I don't want to get up from the chair and I will keep asking Swati, give me Coke, give me Pepsi, give me chips, lower tamas, enjoying it so no one to move. A divine calm, a spiritual being that radiates peace. When you go into his presence, vibrations change. A perfect power, Shakti, holding in itself all its capacity, capable of controlling and subjecting to the law of calm even the most stupendous and enormous activity. It is such a calm that you can be doing 100 things, but you will be very, very calm. And people who are working around you work in that calmness. But you are not inactive, you are working. A very different principle. When I work, the more work I do, the more excitement and agitation happens in me. The more things don't happen, the more agitated I get. Here, I work in a divine calm, but I can do 100 things. when he wrote Arya. Social philosophy on one side, spiritual philosophy on the other side. Vedas, human cycle, that's what social philosophy, human cycle, war and self-determination. So when Swami Vivekananda says that you have to be calm in the middle of the storm of the world, this is what he is referring to. Just imagine the state. It is a very different plane of existence. We can meditate on this principle. The second principle, Rajas, it is a self-effectuating, initiating, sheer will of the spirit. The same perfect power of being and Shakti, capable of an infinite, unperturbable, blissful action. Lot of action, no movement or no restlessness. One should be able to work like this. Sattva becomes not the modified mental light, Prakasha, but a self-existent light of the divine being, Jyoti, which is the soul of the perfect power of being. So, where does the calm action derive its direction from? We talked about the calm action, right? The power of nature in a calm way. Where does it derive its direction? It is this divine, the light of the divine being, that is the sattvic element. And this sattvic element illumines the unity of the divine quietude and the divine will of action. The integral perfection will aim at this greater triune unity. So, a divine calm, sheer will, you can almost think of in one way the divine calm of Maheshwari, the sheer will and work of Mahakali and Mahasaraswati in some ways, the divine being, the Jyoti, that is what I would say is the Mahasaraswati, the vision, the large vistas, the guidance, all of that, right? Somewhere along the way we have to combine these attributes and make them work with us. When this liberation of nature comes, there is a liberation also of all the spiritual sense of the dualities of nature. So what he has said essentially, he in the beginning of the chapter said, इसमें दो चीजें हैं, the gunas, the three gunas and the two dualities, Dvandvatita, Trigunaatita. He says once you arrive at Trigunaatita, you already are at Dvandvatita. Once you arrive at the liberation of nature, you are already at the liberation of the dualities of nature. The seeker of liberation gets rid of attachment, throws away from his soul the dualities. There is a separation of the soul from the nature. Then the soul watches seated above and unmoved. In overcoming dualities, there are two methods again. The first method is where the soul is seated above and it is unmoved. The Purusha principle separating from the Prakriti principle. The strife of the gunas, the conflict of the gunas in the natural being, and all of these it looks at as an impassive observer. Even the duality of birth and death is rejected. You go even beyond that. The integral liberation comes when this passion for release, the thing about Sri Aurobindo is he gives you step by step and then he points out the highest, and when you look at the highest it looks like the top of Mount Everest. What happens to us? आज हमारा क्या approach है? What is our present approach? हमारे जो dualities हैं, like, dislike, anger and peace, happiness and sorrow, इन सब से बाहर आने का एक desire है ना? हमारा सत्व, रजस, तमोगुण, इन तीनों से उठकर बाहर आने का desire है. This will help you overcome that. But eventually he says, even the desire to overcome should be gone. You see, इनसे बाहर आने का डिजायर है. Without that desire you can't overcome. You will be stuck. So you work on the desire, strengthen the positive, weaken the negative, overcome this. But eventually you overcome the desire to overcome also. Radha's prayer.
Complete surrender.
Complete surrender. He says, why should you overcome even that? Because you see the divine principle in that also. The duality is what you consider negative today and what usme bhi you see the divine principle. It's very tricky. The gnosis discovers, when he uses the word gnosis, the other words he uses for that is supramental, Vijnanamaya Purusha, all of that. The next level. Every chapter brings you back to supramental in this discussion. Every single chapter. So he brings in the supramental principle. What is the supramental truth? The gnosis discovers the spiritual sense in nature, God in things, the soul of good in all things, even when they have contrary appearance. The soul is delivered from them and out of them. The perversions of the imperfect and contrary forms fall away or are transformed into the higher divine truth. The liberation of the nature becomes one with the liberation of the spirit, and there is founded in the integral freedom, the integral perfection. So when you transcend all of this, you have integral freedom, and in that is the perfection, integral perfection. Why is he using this phrase integral perfection at the end of the chapter? Because this section is yoga of self-perfection. He brings all of this discussion back to the very purpose why we are doing the discussion. Because we can go through all this, feel very good and go back. He doesn't say that. He says, this is why I am telling you all of this, because this is yoga of self-perfection, and unless you have the integral freedom, you will not have integral perfection. See the beauty of the prose. So, that is the
This is the word perfect.
perfect.
Perfect perfection.
Absolutely. So the next chapters, now we are entering into perfection and equality. See, when we talked about the 4 steps, he talks about purification, liberation, perfection and delight. In chapters 6 and 7, we did purification of the psychical prana, purification of manas and buddhi. So purification is done. Liberation. In liberation we had 2 chapters, liberation of the spirit, liberation of nature. We completed those 2 chapters, the second chapter in that series today. From next, he takes up perfection. And now we'll go into more and more chapters relating to that. So that concludes today's discussion. Let us have a brief meditation. Quiet for a couple of minutes and we will chant Om together. We thank the Divine Mother and the Master for the opportunity to come together, listen to their message and practice it.